Bring in defense attorney Shan Wu for more analysis on this. Shan, the juror who spoke out, said it took, in the end, less than an hour. Yes, it took a few hours for the totality of this verdict to come down, but when it came down to getting from, some people thinking he might not be guilty to everyone saying, yes, he's guilty, it was less than an hour for the jury to agree on that. Was that video that put Murdaugh at the scene of the murders the smoking gun here?
It certainly seemed that way. It really put him in a terrible position in terms of his defense, because he had to admit that was his voice there because he had to testify. If he didn't feel like he had to testify, that would have been different. Different people can hear the same thing, see the same thing, and have differing views on it. He could have sat back in silence and let the jury debate, was that really his voice? But with him being up there for hours talking, they didn't have any doubt that that was his voice.
Yeah, and Diane, this is a family that for generations has been so prominent, not just as lawyers, but as solicitors, so on the side, in a way, of the local government here. The judge really emphasized what a fall from grace this has been for the Murdaugh family.
That's right, Brianna. Look, the judge's comments were stunning this morning. Everybody out here sort of sat in silence, almost with their mouths agape, listening to him dress Alec Murdaugh down. And he went back in history, a century, pointing out that the Murdaughs had been the law here. He had to remove a portrait of Alec Murdaugh's grandfather from the very courtroom where Alec was convicted of murder so he could get a fair trial. Something that Creighton Waters pointed out, so did the Attorney General and the judge, that nobody is above the law. That is part of the fascination across the country with this case. There's power and privilege and people who perhaps had never been held accountable before.
Yeah, I think that's what's interesting. They did seem to be above the law. And then this was very much the comeuppance here. And Shan, you just heard one of his lawyers say they feel pretty good about their appeal. Do you think that they should? Do they have grounds for that?
Well, they certainly have grounds for it. I don't know how good they should feel, but they have a legal basis for it, which is the prejudicial effect of all those financial crimes and fraud coming in, whether that outweighed the probative value of it. And they can certainly argue that it makes them look bad. And the danger of letting in that kind of evidence is you can infect the jury's view that this is just a liar, we can't believe anything he says, he's just a bad person. That's what the defense is going to argue. They'll also argue that because the judge let that evidence in, they had no choice but to put their client on the stand, and they would have preferred to keep him off the stand perhaps and just let the silence and the reasonable doubt work. Putting him on the stand to expose him for that long to cross-examination is very hard for even a really good witness to satisfy that standard and withstand it. And he did not do a very good job for himself during the cross-examination, certainly.
Yeah, look, his financial state and those crimes really go to the issue of motive. And Diane, they do in the case of at least one other suspicious death that surrounds the Murdaughs. Where do things go from here when it comes to that?
At this point, there are still investigations into all of those deaths, investigations that were reopened as well. I can tell you that it has impacted people greatly here. The father of Mallory Beach, the girl who was killed in the boat crash that Paul Murdaugh was charged for driving in before he was murdered, they say sort of tipped this whole thing off, according to the state. He was here today, and he told us that it helps bring a little sense of justice. The fact that this case made sure his daughter's name and what happened to her has stayed in the media, and people did not forget about what happened to her. That is how all of these victims have felt in the end, hoping they too will get justice.
All right, Diane Gallagher, thank you for your continued reporting on this. Shan Wu, thank you for your analysis. And